This is the Planning and Economic Development Council meeting of February 14th. And happy Valentine's Day. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We're going to come back to the minutes, but we'll start with general business of the UDO and process update. And who's doing that? Hiya, Tibbs.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Asia Tibbs. I am the planning supervisor. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me start my presentation. Okay. So today, just to give you an update on the UDO, what we're looking at for process and some potential changes. And again, good morning to the Planning and Economic Development Committee. Again, my name is Asia. So we'll start with a bit of background. The current UDO was adopted in 2019. As you may know, it made significant improvements to update the code for today's market and development trends. Things like small lot patterns, introducing high-density residential to create mixed-use centers, and organizing the code to be a living document are just a few of the successes that came with the adoption of the new code. To date, the code has supported quality development in over 2,300 application reviews, all the way from small residential single lot developments to master plan communities. A vast majority of these applications have run smoothly and without issue thanks to the update of that code in 2019. Moving forward to post-pandemic, there became a desire to see improved efficiency with some of the city review processes established in that code. Therefore, MIG was contracted to review codes and process documents, compare them with other communities, and meet with the development community to learn more about those processes and potential changes. As a result, a product was created and provided to staff, which includes a summary list of perceived issues and potential opportunities. The study is now being concluded, and staff is working on future scoping for potential code amendments in the year to come. Staff has reviewed this opportunities and issues list to determine what tasks might be appropriate for implementation and boil these down to approximately 25 tasks and steps. Several of them are not directly related to planning or the UDO. So today I'm focusing just on the items that involve those two things, the UDO and planning process. So a majority of the items listed in the issues and opportunities are related around the master plan application. In fact, about 7 of those 25 items relate to master plans. Some of them even mentioned twice. So here's a list of the items that were highlighted. A request to update the master plan manual to make processes less detailed and more conceptual at that stage, allowing concurrent submissions of master plans and site plan applications, especially for small projects, amending thresholds for the master plan to make them simpler or not required for small sites, again related to smaller scoping of master plans, simplifying the amendment process, and developing a preliminary plat process for more conceptual requirements prior to technical engineering. Here's just a basic diagram of how the master plan process relates to other applications that we look at. The master plan really is a more conceptual beginning stage, and that feeds into several other detailed applications such as a site plan, an infrastructure site plan, which is a similar vein but just for city infrastructure improvements, and then plats. So as a result of some of the things we're hearing about master plans, staff would like to consider if there's some additional applications that can support the conceptual level of a master plan application. So as you saw, there were a lot of comments about smaller master plans or smaller conceptual plans that might need to address infrastructure. So we would be looking at developing something to the effect of a minor master plan, or how do we address just the needed components at a conceptual level earlier on in the process without necessarily doing a full-blown master plan. And then secondarily, thinking about a preliminary plat or a preliminary plan. This might be more centric to infrastructure improvements and gets us somewhere between a master plan process and some of the detailed things that we're seeing at a site plan level. This may change or modify the site plan process, particularly infrastructure site plan, and staff is exploring to see how this preliminary plan could possibly replace or reduce redundancies in that process. And then I just kind of drew a line here between those two processes. I think it's really important to identify how much of the city of Aurora has been master planned already. And so there is a lot of exchange between the site plan detailed process and the master plan process. And sometimes flexibility is needed that requires amendments or changes to the master plan. So we're really focusing on looking at what does the amendment process look like? When is it necessary? And how do we avoid kind of this back and forth between those types of applications? So moving on, the second most mentioned item is centered around approval processes, not just for master plans, but for a lot of different applications. This one was mentioned, as you can see here, several times as well. Requests to update the recording process. Several other jurisdictions don't actually record site plans, they just record plats. So we'll be evaluating that. Equalizing the amount of work required between all sub areas. As you know, the city right now is split into 3 sub areas, and there's a lot of difference in the approval processes for sub area C versus sub areas A and B. Increasing options for minor site plan approvals, giving greater decision-making authority to the director. So this is kind of removing the discretionary process as much as possible out of certain site plan approvals. And then an expedited review process and our fee incentives for public benefit projects or special projects. This is just a quick little infographic to kind of demonstrate the complexity of approval processes. It's not always as easy as saying this application gets this approval process, and here's why. I already mentioned at the top their sub areas. We do have very distinct areas in the city of Aurora, some very greenfield development coming up from literally a blank plate or a blank slate. And then we also have a lot of infill projects in different sub areas in the original city core. So there's a lot of different areas that have different types, and the public engagement process there is different. Next, moving on, application type. That is related to approval process. Some things like zoning require public hearing processes, so we have to consider the laws around the application that was being requested. Major and minor. Several of our applications have different categories, whether they're a major or minor application, and sometimes their approval process varies. It's a lot easier to have a minor application or a minor change to a site go through administrative process than perhaps a larger one. Public engagement is also an important component. As you all know, public transparency and public involvement in the process is a very important consideration to us. It can be a benefit for the development community to remove those discretionary approvals, but sometimes it limits the public's involvement in the engagement in that process. And so we have to think about how do we want the public engaged? When can we keep them engaged and make sure we're not limiting their ability to participate as well? Next is adjustments. These are kind of referred to as waivers or variances. We want to think about if anytime an application can't meet the development code or can't meet the standards that are established, how do we allow variation from that? Is there room to allow these adjustments some administrative approval rather than always going to planning commission? Again, that's a discretionary approval, and so that has pros and cons both ways. You know, having to go to planning commission for approval sometimes helps get that development into compliance with the code. So we're thinking about our adjustments, what would it look like to allow more administrative approval? And then last but not least, use standards. Each of our applications can be a different use. They can have a different site context. And so there are use standards in our code that address unique situations or uses that may be appropriate in a certain area if they're done a certain way. And so those standards often need to be considered, and sometimes they trigger a conditional use approval. So with all that said, just to give you a quick, summary, there are a lot of different elements that involve our approval processes. I think generally our development community is wanting us to remove some of the discretionary items there, and we're looking through our code to see is that appropriate in all cases, and what can we do to maybe provide more flexibility there. So those were the two main items, and as you can see, that's a lot to take on for the year to come. Staff is also wanting to just, inform the policy committee and others that as we work through this, it's not the only UDO or code amendment that we might be considering this year. There are, of course, policy and political items that get brought to us as we go. We're very aware of Proposition 123, and there's some restrictions there that limit time review for applications. Those may need to be codified in order for us to make sure we're prepared. Additionally, there's legislative items that are in discussion right now that could have significant impacts on our development standards, how we regulate projects, certain types of projects, and then, of course, approval processes. And then others, I put others because as you all know, as elected officials, we sometimes get brought additional items. And so we're always here to hear what those are. And we want to keep in mind a plan of how do we, make sure we address those issues, but also not take on so much that we can't get these other items that we've been working on complete. So the last item I'll mention is planning staff review. We're always looking internally to make sure that we're working efficiently, to make sure that our code is clear, to see if there are improvements that we could make to the code. And we do have a long running list of changes. Sometimes there are minor corrections that you'll see folded into code amendments to come. Sometimes there are larger items that we can't get to depending on how much we have planned this year. But there are some things that you might see here and there to try and fix the code and make little tweaks to make it easier to use. I provided my contact information there. We do have a little bit of time for discussion as you're interested. So we'd love to hear, are there other concerns, thoughts? How are you feeling about we're moving forward so far? And if there's anything additional, you're welcome to email me or send me those. And also, of course, to Janine. That's all I have for my presentation today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's really good. Councilmember Sundberg, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Asia. Whether it's the UDO process update or the next one for the development review, are we utilizing current staff to oversee this and make these changes? I know it would probably takes extra time and time away from your normal work on a day-to-day basis. So have we brought in extra help to make this happen, or how's that working?
Yeah, so at this point in time, we are doing it internally. We're working with a lot of, obviously it involves, especially the master plan process involves all other departments of the city. So we are working a lot of leadership staff to on a regular basis to meet on this and start kind of fleshing out what it might look like. The other items right now are primarily internal to planning. I know that we've had some discussion at a higher level depending on the workload, if that might be needed, but at this point it is in-house. And
Thank you.
I will caveat that with MIG is finishing up their scope to provide a little bit of information and wrapping up that final report. So that is a consultant service that's still being completed.
Thank you.
Yep.
And also, if I may, Janine Restat, Director of Planning and Development Services, that we do prioritize making sure that the applications we are reviewing, those get priority, and get done on time. That is our goal.
And Councilmember Sundberg, from a Deputy City Manager Laura Perry, you will hear in the next presentation, we will be bringing on some consultant help on specific initiatives to help augment staff and our work to improve the development review process.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. I have a couple questions. Can you explain on the recording process under the approval plan? You said site plan or just plats. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so right now the city records site plans, master plans, and plats once they're completed. A lot of jurisdictions only record plats as a land record. And so, that is something, there's a pro and con to that. And so we're evaluating, wanting to make sure that all of our development community and staff would still feel comfortable just keeping internal records for those documents rather than necessarily requiring recording. It does reduce costs. It makes the process faster as well.
Okay, and what is the downside to not having a recording of the site plan?
It is that it relies on internal recordation. The point of, or I should say record keeping. The point of recordation is that it's related and linked to the land. So any buyer, any prospective interest in the party would find that information from the county as a recorded land document. If we do not record them, they would be required to track them down with the city. They would sort of need to be known about it or informed about it. Most applicants and developers do due diligence and know this, and they know that these plans exist, but having them recorded at the county, makes it available in public and open. So
Okay,
there's
so
a pro
if
and con
it
to both.
was not available at the county, they would be able to find it through us still?
Yes, exactly. And we already do have these documents available on our Aurora property maps through GIS, which is a public facing service. We direct people to these all the time on a daily basis. It's just a different way of obtaining that information.
Okay, and then my second question was on the adjustments, the waivers. You said that you're looking at whether some can be done administratively, and that obviously would save time because otherwise you have to go to planning commission. So you have to wait till the next meeting and then come back. So I guess downsides on that would be what?
Downside, there's a couple of things. One is we want to uphold the integrity of the code. The reason those standards exist is because there's a purpose for them, right? They fulfill a variety of things that were established when that code was drafted. If we just allow adjustments and waivers without a lot of sincerity, right, a lot of consideration, then what's the point of having them? So,
Right.
we do want to think about adjustments very seriously. They can trigger a domino effect for a lot of different things, even the smallest change. I think it is important to say you have excellent staff, I think, and we spend a lot of time considering all of those variations from code and working with an applicant to try and get them to meet that standard. But it's always nice to have a little bit of pressure on the development community to make sure that they're really considering how they can meet the code. And sometimes a public hearing process, it does that. So,
It would give the public also an opportunity to opine on a particular variance,
Same.
which I guess if
Exactly.
it was done administratively, they wouldn't have that opportunity.
We do still notice for our administrative decisions, so
Okay.
they would still be able to do that. It's not quite the same. It's not necessarily an opportunity for them to give public testimony and have a public hearing.
Okay, great. I think that's all I had. Thank you so much for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And before we move,
Councilmember Bergan, just on that last question, with administrative decisions, there is a provision in code that the planning director can require it to go to a hearing before planning and zoning. So if more is moved to administrative and we get a lot of neighborhood input, we could then move it to a hearing and allow for that venue for the public to hear.
okay, with that actually, if we're going to do that, I think that's great that we still have that opportunity for staff to move it that way. So, okay, well, thank you. We're going to go back to the minutes for the approval of the minutes. Councilmember Sundberg, how are you on the minutes?
What changes to the minutes?
No changes, wonderful. And I think it's just Councilmember Gardner was not at the last meeting, so
See him.
I also approved the minutes. They will move forward. And next is the next agenda item is the development review update. Laura Perry.
Let me share my screen. Okay, good morning. Laura Perry, Deputy City Manager. The development review process has been a major focal area for the city. And during our presentation today, you will hear an overview of staff's work over the last year in 2023. We are going to share our work plan for 2024, update you on our 2023 year-end workload and on-time metrics, and also provide an update on our development review fund. So the heart of our work on the development review process began with the Red Tape Reduction Ad Hoc Committee. Through the leadership of this committee, staff formulated in consultation with development community a work plan based on the input we received from the consultant community and the development community to streamline and simplify our processes and cost of doing business. Streamlining the development review process is important as we want to ensure a predictable and consistent process, which has been the heart of our focus of our work. In 2023, we accomplished several initiatives that led to increased on-time reviews across all stages of the development review process. We also undertook several updates to manuals and initiated our first phase of updates to the Unified Development Ordinance. We also went live with the new civil and drainage checklists for folks submitting plans in July, or that went live in July. And that was reviewed in consultation with the development and consultant community. And the impact of that is to further our review for quality control and ensure quality submittals coming into the city, which certainly has an impact on metrics and review times. We worked hand in hand with the development community on streamlining our license agreements and implemented dedicatory maps through our real property group, which is also a streamlined effort. In March, we implemented a customer service survey and also have been working hand in hand with staff and a team of staff on implementing technology solutions through the upgrade of our workflow software, Amanda, and continue to hold regular quarterly meetings with staff to develop a culture of performance. And we offer trainings, knowledge sharing, and conversation about various initiatives that we have on the development review process. Circling back on the survey has been really helpful for us as it's allowed us to get a true pulse of the development community and how folks are feeling about our process, its requirements, and offers valuable feedback on improvements that we can undertake going forward, but also gives us insight on what we're doing well. We've heard positive feedback from customers about our customer service, helpful solutions-oriented staff who are attentive and available, and a lot of positive feedback about our building division in particular. The survey and regular communication that we have with our consultant and developer community has also identified challenges and opportunities that require our attention. So we still have a lot of work to do. Challenges and opportunities that we have recognized certainly over our work over the last year. Some of these have been long-standing challenges. Those include our city requirements. So what are we requiring to be submitted on each of our various plan sets? Master plans, as you heard from Asia earlier, site plans, civil plans, drainage, and parks, recreation, and open space. Quality plan submittals. So ensuring that we are getting good product coming through the door. So we've obviously have been focused over the last year on our intake process. You heard a little bit about the checklist, but that continues to be a challenge as workloads are high in our consultant community, and we continue to work to refine and understand what we can do to improve quality plan submittals. There continues to be multiple rounds of review. Those are resulting from consultant missed or repeat comments, new comments from staff that pop up. We also experience design changes midstream from various projects. And so that all is equating to multiple rounds of review. And we're very cognizant of this one as we head into our work plan for 2024. And I'll touch on that in a second. Our timelines, so the metrics that we present, which show on time for each of our stage of our development review process, the timeline for which we're measuring against is 20 years old. And we have come to recognize that there is not a one size fits all anymore. We have small infill projects coming in the door, as well as large subdivisions. 20 years ago, we did not have an Aurora Highlands. We did not have a Windler, a Painted Prairie. These are massive plan sets that are coming through the door, often multiple plan sets. And so that has really framed how we're beginning to look at these timelines and continue into 2024, really digging in on this to figure out how do we get to a place where we don't have a one size fits all anymore. I've mentioned Amanda. Amanda's a very important system for us. It tracks all of our plan reviews. It's our customer portal. It's linked in through our website. And so we continue to have a team dedicated through IT to help support this work to ensure our technology is the best that it can be. I mentioned organization culture and operational enhancements. There continues to be areas of opportunity internally in the city on improving multi-departmental coordination. It takes a village. It takes multiple departments on the development review process. So we've been heavily focused on how we can work better and collaborate together to ensure success and getting projects to the finish line. And then last, staffing and recruitment. So council's heard a lot over the last couple of years about our employment market challenges, hiring, recruiting. We ourselves have focused on internally in the city on employee engagement efforts to ensure that we are retaining staff, but that is also being experienced in the private sector as well. So we have seen turnover in our consultants that we work with as well on development review in the engineering community. So that's something we're also cognizant of, certainly as a challenge and an opportunity that we continue to work through. So building off of the challenges and opportunities that I worked on, I mentioned, we did increase on-time metrics across all work groups in 2023, and that was a huge success across the board. We increased year over year by 12%. You'll see that in a couple slides later. 2024's work plan will focus on getting projects to completion, which is the heart of the matter when you look at the challenges and opportunities presented in the last slide. To accomplish this, our goal is to make institutional changes to our submittal requirements across all disciplines. Again, Asia touched on that for master plans, among other areas. Update our 20-year-old timelines to enhance consistency and predictability in our process. Complete updates to our parks, recreation, and open space, roadway, erosion control, and utilities. And just to touch on that one, that this is where we will be leveraging the help of our industry consultants to help us inform best practices, further flexibility, and model our updates with specifications that meets the needs of the developments that we're seeing today. We're also going to continue to engage with our development community heavily to receive external feedback as we move through each of these items. I mentioned technology upgrades, and Asia talked about some further UDO updates in her presentation. An important point on this slide, we're not going to wait until October to announce all the changes. These changes will be implemented in phases over the course of the year so that we are continuing to demonstrate progress internally and externally on improvements across the board. There are a lot of items that are not listed on this slide that departments are working on. We have departments coming up and identifying new areas to improve as they are doing their work. And so there are many things here that, as I mentioned, I did not list, but I'll touch on in the next slide. So a few more items. Items that we're also looking at include intake and resubmittal refinement. So continuing to look at how we get better quality plan sets through the door. What can we do in our process to help and incentivize that? Looking at the process for the finalization of plans that we're doing, and we refer to that as a signature set. So once you get to the final round, you should not be receiving new comments. We're heavily looking at that, setting expectations on how we can improve that, and again, ensuring that folks reach the finish line. We are looking at additional technical solutions through Amanda. I mentioned the timelines and clocks earlier, but we're also looking at implementing technology solutions to improve the tracking of comments, hopefully reducing the number of rounds of reviews from our staff, and refining that across the board. We'll continue to provide regular updates to our stakeholders, our consultants, our development community, and of course, council as each of these improvements are initiated. And through that, so this sort of outlines our communications plan. So our hope is to provide, obviously, in addition to the PED updates that we do quarterly, progress updates to City Council more regularly, our development community, the HBA, and other really important customers that rely on this process for success. We are also updating our metrics and workload report card for development review. So consistently, we have provided a monthly report card on permit and building activity that has been distributed. We'll continue to post that online. However, we are moving towards a quarterly report card, which will show all of our metrics across the board, across each stage of the development review process. And I'll show you that format in the next slide. So council will expect to receive that every quarter, as well as, again, progress updates on the 2024 initiatives that I mentioned, among other successes that we are experiencing in the development review process. We'll be increasing our stakeholder engagement. I thoroughly touched on this. Making enhancements to our website. We've heard a lot of comments through the customer survey that there's opportunities on our website to streamline, provide a more focused website pages where there's a one-stop shop for all the documents folks need. So we are working on that as well. And then we, of course, leading off of increased stakeholder engagement, will look for new ways to get as much customer feedback as we can, whether it's through surveys, topic-specific focus groups, and other means to make sure that what we're implementing is going to work. So now pivoting to the 2023 workload and metrics. So this is sort of our report card for the 2023 year, and we provided a comparison against 2022. So you can see how performance has progressed year over year. What's shown on the left-hand side is each stage of our development process. And I do want to mention there are multiple departments involved in each step that's shown here. It's not just one particular department. There's referrals that happen between departments, which is why a lot of our performance and cultural work has been done across the full continuum of the development review process. Because it's a village, we have to rely on each other to get every project to the finish line. Departments are continuing to monitor these metrics monthly. The department directors review these, discuss with staff, as they're a really strong indicator of process, operational, and organizational areas of enhancement. And then, so as we look at these, a couple things to mention, development applications. So you'll see year over year, development applications are down 19%. And as I mentioned earlier, the nature of submittals has really changed over time, over the last 20 years. And we're seeing larger submittals than we have in the past. So at one point we were seeing hundreds or 40-acre submittals. Now we're seeing hundreds of acres of submittal. And while the number of development applications are down, that doesn't mean that there's necessarily less work or less plan reviews that are going to staff. It's simply more concentrated in fewer submittals, covering more area, which also results in bigger submittals. So more pages that staff are having to review. So focusing on the metrics, 2023, you can see that column, our on-time metrics. So across the board here, we've had improvement in on-time compared to 2022 for drainage, DAs, and pre-application meetings. This slide shows civil plan sets at 90% versus 75 in 2022. Real property, both easements and licenses, also 11% increase year over year, 12% on-time increase year over year. And then last slide is a summary of our permit activity. So building permits issued in 2023 compared to 2022 is up 40%. And that is primarily due to increases in both new single-family dwellings, and new multifamily units and new multifamily dwellings. So across the board, we've seen increases, and renovation permits. Building plan set reviews. The building division continues to be the gold standard for our development review process. Plans reviewed at 99% on time. Code inspections completed at 96% on time. And then phone calls to the call center. The call center is a really important function for the city. It's sort of the one place where folks go to call to check on status, to ask questions. That team does phenomenal work, and calls are returned within 45 seconds, 92% of the time. Last, ending on our development review funds. So we consistently provide an update on our financials. And as a reminder, the development review fund is the form by which we collect fees placed onto, whether it's plan review, inspections, all those fees go here to cover cost of service for the development review functions and business functions of the city. So you'll note in 2023, our actuals, we actually spent less than our revenues were up compared to what we budgeted. So we brought in additional revenues. Our expenditures were down by 2 million, so 28 million compared to 30 million. And then that leaves us with a total fund balance or cash on hand of about 9.2 million, which is still a healthy fund balance. So if you recall through some of the budget conversations, we did mention that we saw some slowed activity towards the beginning of 2023, which had us monitoring our expenditures pretty closely. Through the last half of the year, we actually saw activity pick up here, which leaves us in a solid financial position on the development review fund. And the last column is our 2024 budget, which we are obviously continue to monitor against. And before I kick it over to questions, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of staff. Councilmember Sundberg, you asked a wonderful question about is staff balancing the initiative workload against the day-to-day workload. And there's a core set of leaders in the city that are really leading the charge on this. Jacob Cox and his staff, Cesarina Dancy, Brandon Camerata, Asia Tibbs, Vern Adams, Sarah Young, Todd Councilman, Scott Berg, and Nicole Akeney. That group of individuals are phenomenal, are dedicated to this work for their department, and are truly pulling the torch on a lot of this work. As we head into the new year, they're meeting sometimes twice a week to talk about solutions, new ideas, and certainly the work plan that we've laid out in front of you today. So I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge their hard work. They're phenomenal, and we're lucky to have all of them at the city, as well as their staff. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Laura. Councilmember Sundberg.
Let's see. Yes. Thank you all for the hard work. And you can tell there's some buy-in on this across departments. People seem to feel passionate about it. I think ultimately our stakeholders, our customers will greatly appreciate this. Laura, you mentioned a couple of times this hand-in-hand cooperation between developers and yourselves. Forgive me, I just created a visual in my mind of Laura, Chris Fellows, Jacob, and Don Provost hand-to-hand walking in a painted prairie park. You're welcome. Just keep that in mind for the rest of the day. But in all seriousness, I do have a couple of questions for you. How are staffing levels for you in this day and age?
We're continuing to monitor that. We did fill a couple of key vacancies in our traffic group. So my last report out, traffic has been down staff, which certainly has been impacting on-time metrics. So we've been able to staff up there, among other areas, a couple of new engineers. So I think more so our vacancies have been now staffed. So we're at a better place than we were, and we're continuing to evaluate workload. We do still augment staff with contractors. So we do have a handful of contractors that augment staff's work to review plan sets, as well as undertake inspections. So we're continuing to monitor that and calibrate as we go forward, but we're excited to have several positions filled.
Okay, and then can you touch on comments? I know some complaints that I've received over a period of time are, things could be progressing along and then some comment will seemingly come out of nowhere and delay things.
Yes, that is accurate. That does happen, and that gets to our work on drilling down on the rounds of reviews. How many reviews are happening at a given time? Why are new comments popping up? Did something change on the plan set that was submitted? Did one of our reviewers find something new? Was there a handover in a reviewer? Someone left the city and we had a new reviewer. So there's various instances that are resulting in that. And we're taking a hard look at that. We've heard loud and clear from the development community. We're tired of the rounds of reviews. Why are there so many rounds of reviews? There should not be 8 reviews happening on plan sets. And so we're diligently working to get that down. 3 reviews, really try to minimize, again, the time it's taking, because more rounds result in more time. But also I'd say the quality submittals also tie into that too. So how much time are we giving our consultant community to turn around plans? So currently in our current timeline, we give our consultant community only 5 days to turn around a plan set. And as you can imagine, on hundreds and hundreds of page plan set, that could be difficult for them. And so it's a balance. It's something we want to work closely with our consultant and development community on. And it's frankly a weekly and daily conversation with staff as we're really digging in on this year.
Okay, and just a couple more things. Thank you for that. A developer might find something within our code just silly or impractical. And do you have a couple of examples of something you've changed to address those types of things? Whether it's
I'm gonna
sidewalks or
kick that
length.
one over to Janine
Mhm.
or Asia.
Asia, can you help me out here? And I will admit a little guilt here. I'm signing subdivision plats. So can you repeat the question while we wait for Asia too?
There's been some frustration expressed by developers of some things within our code that just don't make sense. And I wish I could give you the sidewalk
Yeah.
length or
No,
back alley type of
and
driveways.
this is where Asia has she's leading the current planning with a running list of things we want to change. You saw last year we brought before you the multifamily building. That was a change that we kept getting adjustment after adjustment. So when we see we're getting regular adjustments, that's broke. When we get, and please, when you get complaints, send them to us. Right now, per this discussion, we're prioritizing that deep dive into master plans and the spillover into site plans. But if things are truly broken and regular adjustments, we want to fix that. Asia, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add if there's a situation where there's something in the code that doesn't make sense, like it truly is just not working, that's where we talk to them about it, an adjustment, and we're very supportive of that process. We try to work with them to make something that does make sense. We are bound by the code the way it's written. And so we do have to follow a process for that, but you'll likely see when I talked about that planning list that we have for internal catches, those things end up on that list where we try to get them fixed and worked through. But we always try to find a solution with the developer just to get them through on an interim basis too.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Just, and I apologize because my phone was blowing up while Councilmember Sundberg was asking his questions. On the submittals, obviously, we know that has been probably the biggest issue that we've had. So I think I heard you say that you're looking at what are basically the common issues within that come up so that you can address those and see if there's a way to simplify, whether it has to, I don't know, if it has to be a code change or whatnot, but when you said it's normally right now 5 days for a turnaround for a plan set, so whoever's doing that on the developer side, if it's a massive submittal, that's really, you're saying it's not enough time and they're just getting you maybe partial and then the comments are coming back for second submittal. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
That's what we've been seeing. There's a variety, obviously, of circumstances, but we have seen consultants say, we'll address comment on next review. So they're counting on another round of reviews, and often these particular comments have to do with something in our code. And
Okay.
so we're trying to understand, again, the integration of the timeline, our requirements. What are we asking for too much? And I think there's consensus that we're asking for a little bit too much at each stage. And so we're trying to peel back the onion to say, okay, what do we need? We need to meet code, but also how can we make this process so that there's not that pressure on the consultant community to turn something quickly around to us that impacts quality and thoroughness.
Right.
And so it's a true, I'm going to go back to the slide with the work plan because I think it's helpful to see there are dependencies between all of these things,
Right.
and which is why staff are kind of focusing on these together, because as they're the connection between the different requirements definitely, in a master plan has ripples effect across master plan, and particularly civil and drainage as well.
Okay. And then just on the staffing, when you mention, infill versus these huge development projects that come in, are you able, maybe, I don't know if you can because of staffing limitations, but are you able to put a dedicated person, let's say, to follow through that particular development application all the way through? Because you mentioned, sometimes when staff changes, then the new person comes in and they're kind of learning all over again, maybe something that had been previously discussed or finalized or whatever. So are you able to put dedicated people on large projects versus infill or?
Yes, so the departments do assign a consistent team of reviewers. Now, is there room for opportunity and how we're, structuring teams? Yes, and that is something we're looking at, is a designated team from cradle to grave on a project. Sometimes there is change in the process, and we're aware of that in terms of who's assigned, but our expectation is that that's not to happen. And so we are also, having backups, also taking a look at that to make sure that if one person has to go on extended leave, someone else is quickly, has been following the project along, is up to speed. So we're taking a look at that, and there's certainly opportunity in that space.
Well, I want to thank you for all the work that you've done on this. I know, when we did the red tape ad hoc public hearings and you got all the feedback, it's not something you can turn around in 90 days. And so I do appreciate that you've had to make so many changes in terms of looking at the processes. Obviously, our software, that whole change also was a challenge as well. And so on that, Amanda, we're on the new upgrade, everything is good. I know when we switched from Amanda to Acela and now we're back to Amanda.
We completed a conversion in 2023 up to the latest version to comply with security and other technical requirements for the city. There were some software changes external to that system. So we are in compliance there. We are working with every department now through the upgrade. And there's a whole plan, very thorough, detailed plan, month by month, on each of those steps of that upgrade process.
Great. Well, thanks again. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is retail update. Hi, Bob.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us today. Let me see if I can do the sharing and get this correct. We are very happy about going to Teams next time because we do that more often. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks for having us today. We are going to be doing the presentation on how retail and sales tax generation came out of COVID. The last time we did this presentation, we did not have the final 2023 numbers. We have them now. So this presentation is basically going to be What was it like before anyone heard the word COVID in 2019? And what was it like in 2023 when we made our final comeback and everyone forgot what COVID was? So let's get into it. This is a slide we're going to skip. There's 3 slides that we're going to skip and do at the end if we have time for them. So let's jump right into it. Right off the bat, we're going to do automotive. And this is things like gas stations in the orange bar. Gas stations performed very well during COVID, actually had increases practically every year. And we couldn't figure out why they had an increase in the first year of COVID when nobody was driving. But if you remember, gas prices went through the roof and sales tax is based on the price. So people could have been driving less, but we got more sales tax. So gas for the period of time pre-COVID to post-COVID, 2019 to 23, was up 109% in sales tax revenue. Fantastic. Auto repair on the end, auto repair is in gray, and that was basically flat until 2019, and then picked up again to be up 41% from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Auto sales, truck sales, trailer sales and leasing dipped in 2020. Very few cars were available for sale or lease. People started were driving less during COVID, but it's all rebounded and ended up 24% up from that period of time. Now, remember, that's a 5-year period. So if you want to figure out how well they did on an annual basis, simply divide by 5. But that's a 5% increase every year, which was basically tracking CPI and maybe being a little bit above CPI. Okay, now let's get into home centers and furnishings. Now we're getting to what's called durable goods. The furnishings didn't do very well during COVID. They did pretty well when COVID relief money came out, but then they dropped right back down again in the following year. So they did have some increases, like a 21% increase in 2021, but basically over the whole period of time, it was only a 6% increase over 5 years, about 1.3 each year, which is not keeping up with CPI. They are not happy. Electronics and appliances turns out to be a durable good, but appliances are a durable good. Electronics are no longer considered a durable good. And sure enough, appliances didn't do too well, but electronics did great. So in 2020, they were steadily climbing. 2022 saw a dip, but then after that, it came back strong and they finished 24% up. And most of that was electronics. As a matter of fact, electronics is one of the categories that lifted Christmas this year. We were supposed to be down about 1% going into Christmas. We were up a little over 1%, and electronics was one of the 2 big categories that did that. Home centers, on the other hand, did jump during the slowdown and then jumped again in the following 2 years after that and then flattened. Home centers, including places like Home Depot and Ace Hardware, were up 44% from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Okay, so supermarkets and convenience stores. So this is food and beverage, but this is retail food and beverage, not the restaurants. We'll have them in a minute. Supermarkets and convenience stores rose steadily throughout the period with a slight increase in 2021, but finished with a 34.5% increase from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Specialty food, which is the orange chart you can barely see, that's the bakeries, the meat markets, the ice cream, confectionery, things like that. They leveled off during COVID, but came back stronger after COVID and quickly exceeded their pre-COVID numbers and showed a 49% increase over the 5-year period, almost 10% a year. Now we get to beer and wine and liquor. This is where you can see a shift from one category to another. Beer and wine, they were open during COVID. This is the gray category. And they did quite well going into 2020, but you can see they leveled off. And then they dropped in 2023. As you can see, grocery stores went up. And that was the transfer in 2023 of sales of beer and wine from liquor stores to grocery stores. Now, we still got the sales tax, but there is a transfer going on there that we have to keep an eye on. So that's it for that category. Now let's get to health and personal care. Health is the pharmacies and the supplement stores like GNC, and personal care is all the beauty supplies and perfumes and things like that. Pharmacies were in the thick of the whole COVID response, and showed a 10% increase in that first year and a 5% increase in that second year, but then they gave back that 5% increase in 2022, gave back another 13% in 2023, and we're up an anemic 2.6% over 5 years, which is why you see, and most of that is in the last year or two. So that's why you see pharmacies closing. Personal care, on the other hand, was one of the big standouts. And they only took about an 8% hit at the beginning of COVID when people weren't going to the office. They weren't going out to restaurants, going to nightclubs, and then came back with a vengeance. This is what's called pent-up demand. In 2020, they saw a 30% increase, then a 10% increase, and then a 6% increase, totaling 54% increase from their low in 2020 and 44% over the entire period. This was the second category that lifted all of the sales during Christmas. As an example, Kohl's was flat for Christmas, but Sephora, which is attached to Kohl's, was up like 30%. So Kohl's was actually up by single-digit numbers because of Sephora, but if it wasn't for Sephora, they would have been down. So that's called co-branding, and we're going to see more co-branding happening as the internet changes things. So next category is going to be clothing, hobby, and general merchandise. Clothing, a lot of clothing stores were closed at the beginning of COVID, so they dipped about 16% that first year, but then slowly gained back their traffic, and we're up 76% from their lows and 46% for the 5-year period. Again, close to 10% a year. That's pretty good. That's actually very good, well above CPI. Sporting goods also dropped in that first year, added about 20% in the second year, but generally speaking, only finished up 16% over the whole period. 16 by 5, that's not very good, which is why sporting goods stores are suffering. General merchandise now includes department stores and the discounters. So department stores were closed, but Walmart and Target were open. So during this period of time, they were actually up 9% for that first year of COVID and up 54% for the 5-year period. Next, we get into a category that did not do too well: entertainment, movie pictures, and performing arts. The motion picture and performing arts group took a 50% hit in that first year and slowly tried to gain back whatever they could, but ended up the period down 15%, one of only 2 categories that were down for the 5-year period. The next was accommodations, and this is everything that you spend at a hotel that isn't the hotel room, which is taxed by a lodging tax, which is not included in our numbers. So, of course, they dropped 50% that first year, lost about 50 grand in the second year, but made it all back in the next few years to be up 20% over the period. Now, again, 20% by 5 is only 4%, but that was pretty much matching what the average of CPI was over that 5-year period. So not bad. Now let's get to the restaurants. Restaurants and so restaurants include bars, and but we'll start with the specialty food category. This is the caterers and the mobile trucks, and they just killed it. The first year they were actually up 4%, then they were up 60% the next year, 33% the next year, and 70%, with a record-beating 210% increase from pre-COVID to post-COVID. Full-service restaurants, on the other hand, dropped 25% in that first year, picked up 20% the second year, and then continued to rise in a diminishing level to the point where they were only up 10% over the whole period. That's 2% a year. Restaurants are still suffering. They're behind the curve. Limited service, on the other hand, is the fast food and QSR folks. They just crushed it, up every year, 30% increase from beginning to end. So now we can get to the final results. Here's what happened over this period of time. It turned out that in the very first year of COVID, we actually saw a $1 million increase in sales tax, but that is a minuscule 0.27 of 1% increase because we do a lot of sales tax generation. So it was up, but ever so slightly. By the third year, it jumped 18.7%. And we ended up with a 37% increase from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And that is that's basically better than CPI. So we should be pretty proud of those numbers. And that is the end of that part of the presentation.
Bob, can I ask
and
a
now
question
we're going
here?
to go into
Bob,
a couple of...
Bob, can I ask a
yep.
question on that slide?
Sure.
Because you're moving super fast. When you say okay, so the pandemic was 2020.
Right.
But we actually, compared to some other areas, did very well during the pandemic because we were able to get the internet sales tax.
Right.
Had we not had that market facilitator, ordinance passed, we would have not collected that. And so I know, like Park Meadows, when they were closed down, they were hit very hard. And yet we were, and I remember, because when we budgeted, we thought we were going to be in trouble, and we ended up actually fine with our sales tax revenue.
Right. That's one of the advantages of not having an indoor mall. When you have to shut down, you have to shut practically the whole place down. And so even though the Stanley is theoretically a very small indoor mall, generally speaking, we have outdoor centers. And and that is the new trend, or the outdoor lifestyle centers.
But
And
also
so,
the internet, everybody's shopping it
well, yes,
online.
I can't imagine how much we would have been off if we didn't have that internet. We would have been down significantly. So that was, no doubt about it, one of the best things that's ever happened to our sales tax generation, is making sure the facilitators pay their taxes instead of the individuals.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so the next slide is basically something that everyone's been asking us for like 5 years. Tell us what the vacancies are by ward. And so kudos to Dan and Marissa from the GIS department. This took them quite a while, but they got it done. And we are quite surprised with the results. In the shopping center business, if you're 95% leased, you are killing it. That means you only have 5% available, and you want 5% available so that when the next two concept comes down the block, you have a space for them. If Punch Bowl Social shows up and you have no space for them, you can't get a deal done. So Alfred Talman, who ran Cherry Creek Mall and 25 centers like Cherry Creek around the country, was famous for saying, never be above 95% leased, because you're going to miss out on that next great thing. We don't have any ward that is less than 95% leased. As a matter of fact, we have one ward that is 98.15% leased, which is amazing. So we actually figured it out. Sure enough, the winning ward was Ward 2 with the lowest vacancies.
Ward.
And so, but in general, we don't have any wards that are doing badly, and our average is 3.7%. So it's very surprising. But the next slide is even more surprising. And I'm going to talk about it first. We talk a lot about, are we losing any sales tax to some of our surrounding towns? And how much sales tax are we bleeding out to surround towns? And how much are we grabbing from surrounding towns? And let's take a look at how much we're grabbing. So this is called a heat map. And when you see red, you see the most amount that a person could be shopping at a shopping center. But these are heat maps generated off of 2 different shopping centers that are practically right across the street from each other. Right. So the one on the left is Corner Star. And if you look in the middle, you see that little dot where Corner Star is. The one on the right is Arapahoe Crossing. And the reason they're different sizes, we had to make the reservoir look the same size so that you could tell the difference between the two. Now, look at Corner Star and look at the tech center. Look at how red the tech center is. Corner Star is pulling from the tech center like crazy, but Arapahoe Crossing is pulling almost nothing from the tech center. Look south of now we know that Corner Star is a little annexed part of Aurora. It is surrounded by Centennial and Parker to the south. Look at how much business we're grabbing from Centennial and from Parker and Point South at Corner Star, but not at Arapahoe Crossing. One of the ways to explain the significance in this difference is the going home side of work or the going to work side of work. So when you're going to work, you're generally not in a shopping mood, you're in a coffee mood. You might stop at Starbucks or a coffee shop, but you're not shopping before you go to work. On the way home, you are shopping. Arapahoe Crossing is on the way to work. Corner Store is on the way home from work.
Bob,
There's also,
Bob,
yes.
Doesn't it depend on what stores are in each center?
That's the second half.
It's not just, okay.
You're too smart. You're jumping ahead of me. Yes, the second half of this is having unique stores versus having stores that are everywhere. Corner Star has a unique stores. It has a Target in it, which is not completely unique, but it also has that Nike store, and they're working on another grocer. They had a grocer, they're working on another one. They have more unique stores. Arapahoe Crossing has a Walmart and a King Soopers, which are pretty much everywhere. And so this is the difference between a regional center and a local center. Regional centers pull for more than 5 miles. Local centers generally only pull from 3 to 5 miles. So we should be very happy about Cornerstar. We should be very happy that we're taking an awful lot of sales tax from some of our neighboring towns. And that's because basically the performance of these good centers, and Cornerstar just got bought by another company that's starting to put a lot of energy into Cornerstar. So very good news. I wanted to show you this heat map because this one blew us away. We had no idea that it was this significant, but this is impressive. Anyway, that's the presentation. So now we're into question and
I'd
answers.
like a heat map on Southlands.
We have one. We have one for
And
every
I'd like
ward.
to-
We
well,
just
because
already.
I'd like to know if my residents are going to Park Meadows.
Okay. Yep. By the way, you can kind of see Park Meadows in each one of these over at the corner of 470 and 25. And it doesn't look like we're bleeding too much to Park Meadows in either one of these centers, but we have one for every ward. We were getting ready for the ward presentations on each one of the retail, and so we have them. We can get them to you immediately.
Councilmember Sundberg?
Bob, you had mentioned gasoline tax revenue. Is it too soon to notice any difference in revenue because of a slight increase in electric vehicles?
It is not showing up just yet. The electric vehicle percentage is climbing, but we're not necessarily seeing a drop in gas tax yet. We expect that to happen eventually, but EV sales have sort of dropped off a cliff in the last 6 months or so, and we're waiting to see if that's just a blip, if that's a pricing issue, or if people are literally backing away from them for a little while until there's more infrastructure.
Thanks, Bob.
I have a question on the vacancy.
Mhm.
When you say lowest vacancy, but also kind of apples to oranges, you've got to look at how much space somebody has. I mean, if you don't have a lot of retail, you're going to hopefully fill it up just because there's not opportunities, versus if you have a lot of retail space, you might have more vacancy. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. The tricky part about that is, though, that depending on what's in those centers, you can have a whole lot of anchorless strip centers that have more vacancy. You have less square footage, but you have more vacancy because it's not a Southlands and it's not a Cornerstar. Those have a tendency to be much more occupied. So, and the other thing we need to know about that is sometimes you drive by and you see a vacant store and you go, that store's vacant. Well, if that store was at the end of their lease and they closed 3 months early, but they're still paying rent, that landlord considers it occupied because they're getting rent. So that's the one little thing that if you walk around and start counting stores that are not open, you may count a few extra ones that the landlord is simply waiting for the rent to run out in 3 months and then they're going to lease it.
Okay, that makes sense. And then just a question on when you were on the slide about home furnishings, home goods.
Yep.
Is that the one I'm looking at? Wait a minute. I had a question on that one. Now I can't remember what it is. Actually, it was on the lodger's tax. What category was that?
Lodger's tax. Let's see what we have.
Oh, it was entertainment accommodation. Sorry, that's where.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah. And you said we were down 15% over 5 years. But I thought I saw a little note about doesn't include lodger's tax.
Right. Actually, that one was up 20% over the period of time, but it does not include lodging tax. So it's everything that you spend at a hotel, like when you go to the restaurant or that little convenience store. If it doesn't have lodging tax, it normally has sales tax. We don't count the lodging tax. That's a different department.
Okay, so, but then I guess since it's in that category, couldn't hotels, do we know if they were up during that 5-year period?
Well, if we take a look at the amount of money people were spending outside of lodging tax, it does look like they were up, but I'd have to ask Bruce, Visit Aurora, if he had the number specifically on just the hotels.
Okay, and then lastly, sorry. Oh, was somebody going to say something? Oh, Bruce is
Bruce
there.
is probably going to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that lodger's tax collections for 2023 were at their highest level ever.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And then lastly, Bob, you're going to be meeting with each ward council member, is that my understanding?
Yep.
So will we be able to see specifics on trends and vacancies and sales tax and so forth?
Yep, we'll be able to go center by center and tell you everything you wanted to know about each center and what they're up to and what our plan would be to help them improve their centers if they would like us to help them.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks as always for your excellent presentation.
No problem. Thank you much.
Thank you. And now we'll move into miscellaneous reports. And I see Chance, Havana Bid. How are you?
Good morning. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you so much. I love seeing the numbers because even Bob knows it's a pretty good reflection of our 30 plus shopping centers on Havana. I'll reach out to Bob for Gardens on Havana and Village on the Park because I know he'll probably be able to help me with some data. So great, great sharing and reporting. Really briefly, I just wanted to kind of hit some of the new businesses, events, and then most specifically just share some of the new businesses coming. The Nana's Dim Sum and Bao, which everybody has been waiting for, this dumpling shop that's doing really well in Denver and Boulder. It is coming to Havana. I'm hoping in the second quarter because it's supposed to be the first quarter, but it'll be at Village on the Park. It'll truly be a destination restaurant because it is very popular right now in Colorado. The Maverick opened, I think we talked about before. It's really beautiful at Havana and Yale. We also have the rebranding of the Come and Go.
We sent that information.
Sorry, Bob, you're still
Bob,
on.
you need to mute your.
I just want to keep it quick. And then
Sorry.
also we got Auntie Anne's and Jamba Juice at the Gardens, which is one of 15 hybrid concepts in the nation. It's in Aurora. So pretty big deal. He's from Georgia, small business owner. So definitely go and support the Gardens. Also, another small business owner that took a very large space is the Ace Hardware at the Gardens on Havana, and they're doing well. I personally love Ace Hardware. Don't get me wrong. I love me an Home Depot and Lowe's, but he's an amazing small business owner. His name is Alex. Highly encourage you to go check it out. It was that former Toys R Us space. Remember, there's 25,000 or 42,000 square feet. I think Françoise asked me, one side is Ross, the other side is now Ace Hardware. So super excited about that. There are also new businesses from an empanada, halal markets, 100% halal markets that will be opening. Some new concepts with Soul Hospitality Group. If I'd love to welcome maybe even this group in the future, we want to host something at Izakaya, which is our newest Japanese restaurant and pub. It's kind of the elevated sushi. It is beautiful. They spent almost 2 years renovating that former Thai basil space. Highly recommend checking them out for happy hour. They also are going to be doing some lunch specials. And then just quickly regarding our events, you can definitely go to onhavanastreet.com. We just hosted our first Lunar New Year. Oh, I hope we can do puppy events this summer too. It was a huge success. We had thousands of people that came out after a blizzard, way more turnout than we ever expected. I think some of the food vendors sold out within 2 hours. Thank gosh we supported mostly local Aurora restaurants. So they are able to go back and forth to the restaurant 3 or 4 times to restock on food. And even the global market vendors told me they sold out. Some of them did better in our 6-hour event on Havana Street than they did in a 2-day wine festival in the mountains. So I really think we'll bring back the Lunar New Year Festival just because there was such a huge draw and we had thousands of people show up even during a blizzard. Most of the events and activities, line dancing, taiko drum, and performances were inside, but we also did outside performances too, just because there were so many attendees. And then lastly, we will be bringing back the night markets. It'll be the last Saturday of the month. So we are trying not to conflict with any existing events in Aurora. It'll be family friendly. It's 6 to 10. It'll be at Izakaya. Unfortunately, we had so much success at Sam's number 3 the past couple of years. But with their closure and not knowing who will be the lease this summer, we decided to not negotiate using that space this summer, and we'll be at Havana and Yale at Izakaya, who has been an amazing partner as a stakeholder as well. So we'll have night markets the last Saturday of the month, 6 to 10. And then, of course, we welcome you to join us at other events along Havana. March is Small Business Month, so I'm sure I'll report more in March about some of the activities going on. And if you have any questions regarding specific properties or businesses, feel free to reach out to me. But happy Lunar New Year and happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Thank you, Chance. You always have so much going on there. Appreciate all your work. And I probably should have been asking Councilmember Gardner. I don't know if he has audio yet, but if you have any questions on any of the presentations, sorry, not hearing them. Okay. And I don't think we have any other reports. Becky Hogan from Planning Commission. I guess we have the update in the agenda packet. Becky, do you have anything else you want to add or?
Just that we have 3 items on Planning Commission this evening, 1 project in Ward 2, 1 project in Ward 3, and 1 project in Ward 4. So we're looking, you know, we're so excited about spending Valentine's Day on a virtual meeting, but we've got good things. Everybody in those
You should have rescheduled your meeting.
Yeah, well, you know, developers wait for no one. I would like to say personally, thanks again to Asian Avenue Magazine on Havana and Bonfire. For those of you that were not able or thought maybe nobody's going to come to an event, you know, for the first time after a snow, it was an outstanding success. I mean, like, and you would have stood there and your eyes would have been popping out because there were so many people and they just converged and they were among dancing lions and big drummers and dragons all over because it is the year of the dragon. So it was outstanding. They did a great job. And thank you to City Council for honoring those in our Asian community in celebration of Lunar New Year.
You're welcome. We're happy to do that and we'll look forward to it in the future. I see in the chat that Bruce Dalton put, there's a great recent story in the Denver Gazette featuring J.W. Lee, who owns Lizakaya and other restaurants in the Havana Bit. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Okay, we'll look for that in the Gazette. Anything else, Janine or Laura, that we need to report?
Nothing on my end.
Okay. Next meeting is scheduled for March 13th. So we will see you next month. Everyone have a great Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Bye.